If Archbishop Tutu were with us today, I stumble over the beginning of my homily because I do think he's with us. And the High Commissioner didn't help me with his wonderful sign of authentic love and his pause, remembering the arch. I do believe he is with us, and I believe he is a saint, represented on these stained glasses of a communion of saints. I do believe he is with us. If the arch were with us in flesh and blood, I think he would tell us a story. It would be a story similar to the lesson in Micah. It's a story not simply about rhetoric and what we say we will do and we never do it. Micah is about doing the action and then saying the words. It's a story similar to Jesus saying, "Abide in me as I abide in you." I believe the arch would tell this story. It's a story similar to the famous quote attributed to St. Francis of Assisi, one of the arch's favorite saints, St. Francis. Preach the gospel always, and sometimes use words. It's a story similar to that famous wisdom. So let me go ahead and tell the story. A member of the church who previously had been attending services regularly just stopped coming. And after a few weeks, the pastor noticed and decided to visit him. It was unlike our weather today. It was a chilly evening. And the pastor found the man alone, sitting by a blazing fire. Guessing the reason for his pastor's visit, the man welcomed her, led her to a comfortable chair, and asked her to sit near the fireplace. And then he went and sat and waited. The pastor made herself at home, but she said nothing. And in the grave silence, she contemplated the dance of the flames among the fire, the dance of the flames among the burning logs. And after some minutes, the pastor took a fire tongue, carefully placed it out of its brilliant fire, placed an ember aside, and she and her parishioner watched the fire burn out. And she sat back down in her chair. And after a few minutes, she got up again, placed the still, ashy ember back into the fire. And they both watched it begin to burn again. Now the host, all the while, watched this in quiet contemplation as that one lone ember's flame flickered, diminished. And this host, caught in this contemplation, saw this ember alive again. Not a word was spoken. And then the pastor glanced at her watch and she realized it was time to go. She slowly stood up and she picked up a cold ember outside again. And she wanted it to be seen by this host. And she placed it again in the fire. And as she began to leave, the host said to the pastor, "Thank you so much for your visit, especially for the fiery sermon. I will be back in church." I think the Arch would say his sermon beyond words, beyond rhetoric. I think he says his sermon through his life. And the best sermons are through our life, our character, our legacy. I think the Arch understands that being out of community makes us lifeless, out of touch. Being out of community makes us less human. I think the Arch would want us to understand the fiery sermon for our own selves. It doesn't have to be a church, but it needs to be a community in which we burn with passion and care for each other. I think the Arch teaches us that we are made for heaven. But heaven is a tricky place. On the one hand, we are tempted to believe that we are already there, especially if you are rich, if you can control people, you are an influencer, and everything is going your way. But for many, they make heaven a delusion in which they will continue to look for another life outside of this one. I think the beauty of the Arch is that he shows a legacy, a life that heaven has to begin here and now. That some people can't be in and some people can't be out. The Arch reminds us that the power of being a human being is being in relationships. And that's also the power of God and the very image of God. God is not some man upstairs, some individual. That's a heresy. It's called modalism. God is persons in community, three persons in particular, and especially on this Sunday in which we recognize Trinity Sunday. God is the relationship that God is having. God is not an individual. God is relationality, and we call that relationality love. The Arch's life is that legacy of holding together relationships even with his enemies, having this profound way of seeing in which he could not be complete unless an Afrikaner was complete. Powerful, provocative, controversial. Of being able to say that we need to be interdependent. That there cannot be only one kind of utopia for one kind of people. God's ways of being an image in this world is always about interdependence and cooperation. But we lose our way. And we lose our way as I begin to stumble in the beginning of this homily. If the Arch were with us today, we find ourselves in doubt, we find ourselves alone, and we find ourselves in this Western world in which the individual is worshipped. And it's difficult for us to know we cannot be complete alone. Do you know the worst kind of torture, especially among those who are incarcerated? The worst kind of torture is solitary confinement. And the arch knows that it's ridiculous, it's dysfunctional, it's evil to practice a life alone, in isolation. We must no longer be lost. We must be found. And the arch's life, I think, is a light among our path, a way of finding which way to go. And I think the arch gives us two lamps to continuously hold up. I think the first lamp is akin to having a heart for the stranger. Having a heart for the stranger. The heart is that faculty in human beings in which there is a constant strain toward the divine. The heart longs for the divine. It's not this flesh of a heart, it's a being, a core that is always like a plant bent towards light. The heart is always straining toward the divine. And having a heart for the stranger, I think, is one of the arch's prowess, one of his most powerful ways of speaking. His voice that's helping us to strain toward proximity with those that we have been estranged from. The arch's prowess is in his voice that when you move toward God, you cannot help but move toward your neighbor. And who is your neighbor? Our neighbor is the one in our backyard that we take for granted, overlook, and despise. We've lost our way. And we need to be trained in the heart, that core of straining toward those who are different from us, those that we have taken for granted. And I think those we have despised. And like all human faculties, the heart needs to be trained to resist the cliche of familiarity breeds contempt, to resist the posture of overlooking the child of God. We need to be trained in the heart. Otherwise, all thinking of God, all thinking of politics, all thinking of economics, all thinking of creation, all of this will grow distasteful if there is no integrity of being for those who are different from us. We lose our way if we think all that matters is the modern trinity: me, myself, and I. The arch's legacy is an antidote to that, of learning to strain to move toward the stranger. And I think the last light that the arch leaves us with, and I think he's still with us, so he still holds up in our midst, is having a heart for the spiritual life. And I know this is not always popular, especially as religion has been used for abuse. And I know it's been hard in particular for Christianity that in many ways has represented colonial power. But the arch encourages us to see true religion, especially as the namesake of this cathedral. True religion is not in talk. St. James says true religion is in what we do. Having a heart for the spiritual life. There is a counterintuitive element to developing a spiritual life. People who move into a deeper and more mature spiritual development frequently complain that they are doing nothing at prayer, that they are wasting their time, that they are idle, that nothing seems to happen, that they are in total darkness. The counter-intuition here is that they may actually be really mature, that they are not drinking the Kool-Aid, that they are not following some charismatic leader. It may be that they are more mature in resisting idols called Christianity. Those who are disaffected, fed up with the church, may actually be longing for the true, authentic witness of God. For example, Isaiah has a vision of God, and he says he couldn't see clearly. And it says this in Isaiah, "And the foundation of the threshold shook at the voice of him who called, and the house was filled with smoke. And I said, woe is me, for I am lost." Here is one of the most powerful prophets in the Bible saying, I am lost. For those of you, for those who may be watching this, be of good courage. Your disagreement with the church, your isolation with the church may actually show maturity, spiritual maturity. Don't give up on community. Don't give up on spirituality, whether it's Christian, Islam, Hindu, Jewish. Don't give up on seeking and straining toward the divine. And I think the Arch would say the most mature are those who give and who practice gratefulness. The highest form of prayer is to be grateful. I close with the Arch's humor as he holds up these lights to us, strain toward the stranger and strain toward deeper spirituality. I think the Arch, through his prowess of humor, does not want us to go out without laughter. So I'm putting a lot of pressure on myself for this joke I'm about to tell you. It is like a priest who walked into a bar, indignant to find so many of her parishioners there. She rounded them up and shepherded them into the church. And she solemnly said, all those who want to go to heaven, step over here to the left, my left. And everyone stepped over except one man who stubbornly stood his ground. That priest looked at him fiercely and said, don't you want to go to heaven? And the man said, no. Do you mean? She said, do you mean to stand there and tell me you don't want to go to heaven when you die? Do you actually mean that? Of course I want to go to heaven, he said. I just thought that you were going now. An interviewer asked the Arch, what do you think heaven will be like? The Archbishop closes his eyes to ponder, spreads his palms out on a table, and says, it will be spatially, temporally different, of course, It is difficult for us to conceive of an existence that is timeless, where you look at absolute beauty and goodness and you have no words. It is enough just to be there. You know how it is when you are sitting with someone you love and hours can go by and what seem like seconds. Well, in heaven, eternity itself will pass in a flash. In heaven, we will never tire. We will never be bored, because there will always be such new sides of God that are being revealed in us, and that were revealed in us on earth. If Archbishop Tutu were with us, and I do believe he is, let us always remember his legacy, and let us also practice his legacy. Amen.
Lord, dear Lord of love, God Almighty, God of love, please look down and see my people through. Lord, dear Lord of love, God Almighty, God above, please look down and see my people through. than lilies of the valley. They neither toil or spin, and the flowers bloom in springtime. Little birdies sing. So often we'll feel weary, but He knows our every care. You just go to God in secret, and He'll hear your every prayer. Then He'll bring peace and comfort to every troubled mind. Come Sunday, oh, come Sunday, that's the He's gonna lay down His heavy load down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. He's gonna lay down His heavy load down by the riverside. Ain't gonna study war no more. He's gonna meet all his brethren there down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. He's gonna meet all his brethren there down by the riverside. Ain't gonna study war no more. He ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. The art, he won't study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. He ain't gonna study, he won't no more. The arch ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Rest in peace, Archbishop Tutu.